For more, let's cross to Helsinki and Henry Van Hanen. He is a research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me.
How did your president do in Ankara on that?
I think, as he mentioned before going to Ankara, that we are going to be expecting a decision by the Turkish side, and that the president has made a decision on Finland's NATO accession, and the outcome was as we expected. It's usually not the case that presidents negotiate about things. It's when we meet at this level, then the result has already been mostly settled. So in this sense, I think it was quite expected that the message from Turkey is going to be positive vis-a-vis Finland.
And it was. How does it sit, the fact that it's Finland without Sweden? After all, there's a large Swedish minority. I believe it's an official language where you are is Swedish in Finland. How do Finns feel about it?
Well, of course, this was a sovereign decision. You have the application of Finland and Sweden, so you have two separate applications. And of course, Finns are positively reacting to Turkey going forward with Finland's NATO membership. That being said, of course, it's in the national interest and the national security interest of Finland to have Sweden on board as fast as possible. And I think this was quite clearly also expressed by the President Niinistö, when he met Erdogan, when he said that Finland's NATO membership doesn't feel complete without including Sweden in NATO. So I assume that the next priority in terms of foreign security policy for the Finnish government, this one and the one after the elections that will take place in April, will be to include and support Sweden as much as possible to get the quick accession to NATO as well, hopefully by the Vilnius summit.
Yeah, those elections just 2 weeks away, and the incumbent prime minister turning heads when she said that Finland was ready to pledge fighter jets to Ukraine.
Well, that was a question that she was asked about. Should we have think about this issue? And to which she replied that, of course, we can discuss. But at the end of the day, I think it's a very short discussion, because if you think about the life cycle of the Finnish Hornets, and also considering that they are going to be outdated and the new fighters will arrive, the new F-35s in a couple of years. So Finland could be theoretically ready to give fighters at the fastest pace in 2026. And by this time, I think it would be quite late, since Ukraine needs fighters right now. And also those Hornets would be very, very much close to the end of their life cycle. So I think the idea doesn't really have that much support.
Now, we've been putting the spotlight on Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but of course there's another holdout among NATO members, and that is Hungary. And lo and behold, on this Friday, just as Recep Tayyip Erdogan was giving the green light to Finland, suddenly Viktor Orban announces that Parliament will be considering before the end of the month Sweden and Finland's NATO application. Your reaction to the synchronization, if you will, or the timing or the coincidence of all this?
Well, honestly, I think it was a bit surprised to understand that Hungary is going to split the process as well. They indicated that they would ratify only Finland later this month, and Sweden after that, without no separate date given for that. Well, we do know that there's probably been a very strong coordination between Turkey and Hungary throughout the process. They have said publicly that they don't want to put pressure on each other in terms of the ratification process. So in this sense, there were some doubts about whether Hungary could possibly split the process. We didn't have any signs of this before. But of course, this was always something back in our minds as a worst case scenario. But I think now the question will be, are there specific demands by Hungary, or this is going to be a delay without any further inquiry into what is the desire of Budapest? I think we'll have to see and wait. Hopefully this will be a fast process by the Vilnius summit, and this won't be a bigger problem than it potentially is.
What's Viktor Orban's calculation?
Well, to be honest, it's quite difficult to know at the end of the day. Even this announcement came as a surprise both to the Finnish and Swedish political leadership. And we do know that Orban visited Erdogan yesterday, so we don't really know certainly what they spoke about, possibly the accession process and the splitting. It's possible. But at the end of the day, there's no clear reason for Hungary's delays or objection at this point. They have not said clearly a reason for this. And this leads to us trying to figure out the process. I think we just have to wait and see.
Henri van Anen, your thoughts on this day about Finland's place in vis-a-vis Russia? After all, you go through the whole of the Cold War, remaining a neutral country, that Finland does, and now here they are at the doors of NATO.
I think you have to look at the longer context of Finnish-Russian relations, and you can see a pattern that this is a relationship between a smaller country and a greater power, meaning that there's an imbalance between Finland and Russia. And throughout the Finnish history, independence history since 1917, Finland has always tried to find a way to balance this imbalance between Finland and Russia, trying to find a way to have a tolerable and meaningful relationship with the Russians that is not too unbeneficial. And I think in this context, you have to understand that joining NATO is just a reaction to Russia's aggressive behavior, and hence another way trying to balance the imbalance between Finland and Russia. So I don't really see a big change in this context. The neutrality was already ended when Finland joined NATO in 1995, and neutrality itself was only a way to keep the Soviets at an arm's length so that they won't be able to influence Finnish domestic and foreign policy as much as they could have if Finland would have been included into the Soviet Union. So you always have to look at these as tools to balance Russian behavior by Finland.
Henri van Anen, many thanks for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me.